Hi, I'm Meg Switala with TiER1 Performance. Welcome to this session on mental health. Mental well-being is such an important part of healthy, high-performing cultures, so we're glad you're here. We also recognize that the conversation around mental health conditions, mental illness, is not always an easy one. Several years ago at TiER1, we found ourselves in that same space. In fact, back in 2015, as our founders were discussing ways to make a greater impact on our community and on one another, they realized that there was one area that we really didn't talk about a lot, and that was around mental health conditions, mental illness. And so it raised the question, if we could do something to reduce the stigma around mental illness, normalize it, talk about it in the same way we do physical health conditions, maybe we could start to make a difference. So we reached out to mental health experts, psychiatrists, psychologists, counselors, and leveraged the skills of our consultants in the areas of change, communications, creative, technology, learning, and research, and designed a one month long experience called Start the Conversation. We piloted the journey in our own organization, and since then have offered the toolkit free of charge to numerous other organizations, and have seen the tremendous impact it has made in the area of mental health, but also in making a difference in strengthening the openness and trust of a culture. With the time we have today, I'll start by sharing a high-level overview of mental health, and then we'll pause for an activity, creating space for you to discuss, reflect, and share. So let's get started. 1 in 5. 1 in 5 are currently experiencing a mental illness, and mental illnesses are conditions that affect a person's thinking, feeling, mood, or behavior, and are brain-based diseases. So they're common. In fact, they're more common than heart disease, cancer, diabetes combined. In fact, 2.5 times as common as those diseases. Nearly half of all Americans will experience a mental illness in their lifetime. And the challenges often begin at an early age. Half begin by age 14 and 3/4 by age 24. 11 years. 11 years is the average length of time between the onset of symptoms and treatment. Think about that. We would really never let physical health symptoms go that long. We get them checked out, right? What if we start to think about mental health in the same way? We see those symptoms and get them checked out, reduce the time between symptoms and treatment, increase the likelihood of getting well. Delaying treatment worsens the outcomes. And so we see that the longer the delay in getting help, the more difficult recovery can be. Research also shows that people are more likely to seek help if someone close to them suggests it. So understanding the signs and symptoms is really important. There are many types of mental health disorders, and there are a lot of resources available to better understand these. Some of the ones you may be familiar with: depression, anxiety disorders. That includes panic attacks, general anxiety disorder, PTSD, addiction and substance abuse, eating disorders, which has one of the highest mortality rates of mental health illnesses, ADHD, bipolar disorders, OCD, schizophrenia. There's many different types of mental illnesses. And again, there's a lot of resources available to better understand these. So we're all on a mental health continuum, from optimal mental health and really thriving to poor mental health. It can fluctuate. And also, this spectrum of mental illness can be very severe to mild to no mental illness at all. So, better understanding where we are and recognizing that we can experience a severe mental illness and still experience optimal mental health if we're able to have the right treatment and be able to cope well. Knowing the early signs and symptoms is key. And so each of those mental illnesses may have signs and symptoms to look for. At a very high level, here are a few things to consider. A key to a lot of this really is noticing the change over time. So if it's a prolonged symptom for 2 weeks or more consistently, because we all experience different moods, but recognizing if something seems more than that. So change in appearance or behavior over a period of time. And that could be maybe being unkept or disheveled clothing, emerging pattern of canceling or missing appointments or not returning text calls, losing interest in activities someone may have enjoyed in the past, or it's just extreme prolonged sadness and worry can also be signs. Difficulty concentrating, lack of focus, unusual indecisiveness. So things that we may experience, but again, is it a consistent in a space where it's preventing you from your normal functioning? There's a lot of tools to learn more about these, and a great resource is Mental Health America's online screening test. So these are all free and confidential, and it gives you an opportunity to kind of explore a few of these and check out the signs and symptoms. Another key piece to understand is your family history of mental illness. So, just as important as it is to understand your family physical health history, mental health history does play a part in a lot of these illnesses as well. It's not the only factor for sure, but understanding it is key. The challenge often is that mental illnesses may go undiagnosed. um, and so sometimes it can be harder to understand this, but it does provide an opportunity to have discussion with family members of maybe even recognizing some of the signs and symptoms. Some of these illnesses have high genetic links, bipolar disorder, for example, ADHD. And so when we think about the screening we go through when we know a physical illness is in our family history, it's also something we need to be aware of within the mental health as well. Well-being also affects business outcomes. So while this is so important just for our own um, support of one another, and talking about mental health is the humanitarian thing to do, we also recognize that it does impact business outcomes. And so there's a lot of research that shows the cost of mental health in the workplace, including the cost of absenteeism, presenteeism, showing up for work but not fully being able to be there. And that may be because you're preoccupied trying to care for a family member that is experiencing a mental illness. And then there's other costs involved as well in terms of turnover. So, employees um, are looking for care about their well-being. And so this research shares that we're less likely to search for a new job when we feel like their employer cares about our well-being. We're less likely to experience burnout. And we're all seeing the research on burnout right now. And we're 3 times more likely to be engaged at work. And so clearly, you care about well-being by being part of this program. And so it's a great start. We are going to pause now and give you an opportunity to dive into an activity that will help start some conversation of why this is important to you, and then perhaps some of the learnings that we just shared. If you are surprised by any of those, or how that may connect to anything you have experienced.